and everything is uphill, tough, kind of stall out. Never thought it would be hard like this. Doesn't look all that big, looks the same from the outside, but the small thing turns out to be big. Sometimes we get hamstrung, we get discouraged by failure. We think, yeah, I tried ice skating once. I kept falling down. Everybody was laughing at me. I'm not going to ever do that again. I've had it. That one failure was enough to convince me I'm not going to try again. That happens to us a lot in life. Or sometimes we're just afraid we won't succeed. We're afraid to try even because maybe I won't be a success. Abraham Lincoln got so fed up with George McClellan, his major general at the beginning of the Civil War. McClellan was always preparing. More and more men, more and more materiel, more and more preparation. Lincoln said, when are you going to attack? Well, I'm not quite ready yet. He finally replaced McClellan. Sometimes we can't take that first step. Nothing big there, but fear is in the way. Now, this is not a lesson, and chapter 8 of Joshua, which is where we are, is not a lesson in how to overcome and be successful in our just personal life. That's not the point. But when we see the kind of obstacles, spiritual obstacles, that Joshua and Israel faced in chapter 8, then it reminds us of God's ways with man, the keys to our spiritual success. Here's the issue for Israel. The second generation, after the first generation died in the wilderness, they had become accustomed to success. They felt entitled to success. They defeated those two Amorite kings on the other side, the eastern side of the Jordan. Then Balaam, that hired prophet who came down from around Babylonia to curse them, he showed up and he only pronounced blessings. They just felt blessed. We're just entitled. They defeated the Midianites, victorious over them. The Jordan River just dries up and they cross over. And then the water comes back several hours later. This is just what it means to follow God. It's all easy. They encircle Jericho to battle it. And the walls just fall out and form a ramp up into the city. Wow, this is great. And also, of course, when the walls fell, most of the warriors who were on the walls fell with the walls. So, piece of cake. They felt entitled to that. Ai was the next city they encountered on their way north. Smaller city. Didn't look like it'd be that difficult. I'm sure they felt entitled to victory. They just sent a small contingency up there to take care of that little place. Ended up being defeated, chased, humiliating pursuit down the road, the quote way south. 36 men killed, and suddenly they were discouraged. They were afraid. Seemed so easy. It had been so easy for so long, and now it's hard. Could they recover? And that's a question that each one of us has to face when we hit those obstacles, when we hit surprises, when we feel entitled to success, and here is a difficulty. You know, we have the perfect family until we don't. We have our spiritual house in order. We're on top of the world until suddenly we're surprised by sin. I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I said that. And suddenly, it's not so great. Our life has been smooth and easy for years. We feel like we're just entitled to financial comfort, physical health, the respect of everybody who knows us. And suddenly, health is gone. Our financial embarrassment hits us. Or maybe a scandal, maybe deserved, maybe not, enters our life. Oh, can we recover? How do we recover? And here's the worst part. In the past, we may have had a wonderful spiritual life. We look forward to times of prayer. We prayed constantly. We just looked for ways to do good for others. We pursued purity. We were unashamed of our faith. We dreamed of eternity. We sang hymns to ourselves. The whole world to us was just bathed in the glory of God. It looked beautiful. Goodwill in our heart to all people. Spiritual victory was ours. And then suddenly, or maybe slowly, for reasons that we might know or that we don't know, maybe no particular reason, as Forrest Gump would say, we begin to lose faith, begin to lose fervor, begin to lose confidence. We can't even really point to a particular thing, a small obstacle, an AI in our way. Can we recover? That's the question for today. Are we condemned to spend the rest of our life just in the doldrums, dreaming about the past, beating ourselves up, thinking about what we coulda, shoulda, woulda done, anger, regret, the paralysis of analysis? Is that the best we can hope for after we hit a roadblock? Or can we recover? Joshua 8 says that we can have victory. It shows us how to find restoration and victory. You know, God had not abandoned Israel. He hasn't abandoned us. He had plans for Israel. He has plans for us to do good and not evil. But we need to do our part to get back on track. And there's going to be ups and downs. Some of it may be our fault. Some may be just the fault of Satan or sin in someone else. But let's look at the process of recovery. First thing Joshua did, as we saw last week, is he started praying. Why did this happen? What are we going to do? And we told that he tore his clothes, he and the men with him. Dust on their heads, laid down. They were asking the right questions, and they were asking the right person. And that's how we have to begin. They didn't start by blaming others. He didn't start by investigating what went wrong. He said, we need to get right with God to begin. So that's the right first step. When we step out of, well, the problem, of course, as we know, was sin in the camp. One of the warriors had violated God's command, and that was the source of the problem. But when we step outside of God's will, when we disobey, when we bring things into our tent that we know are not supposed to be there, we shouldn't be surprised when our little red wagon overturns. That's, C.S. Lewis in The Problem of Pain said, God speaks to us in pain. Pain is God's megaphone. If you don't listen other ways, God will send pain to you, as he sent pain to Israel to get their attention. So that was one possibility, and that was the reality in this particular case. It's not always the case. Stephen didn't do something wrong, and that's why he was stoned. The Apostle Paul didn't do something wrong, and that's why he was shipwrecked or beaten or imprisoned. So it's not always our fault. But a good place to start is where Joshua started. What went wrong? Have we done something? Turn to God for answers. We're tempted to turn other places. What did King Saul do when they suffered a setback, a military setback? Well, he goes to a sorceress, the witch of Endor. Makes us think we're in Bewitched or something, but the witch of Endor, an actual historical personage. He goes to her to find out what he needs to do. David sinned with Bathsheba. He didn't say, what have I done wrong? He kind of knew that already. Instead, he starts trying to cover it up, ends up with murder. And Joshua does the right thing. If you listen to his prayer, and this is where we'll end up, this kind of summary part. He came real close to blaming God. He says, why didn't you just leave us on the other side of the river? Why did you bring us over here to kill us all? Close to blaming God. Here's the beauty of that scene. God knew it was his fear and his despair that was speaking. God knows, as long as we're honest communication, God knows when it's the fear in us speaking, when it's our discouragement talking instead of our faith. God listens, and God replied. God told Joshua just what he had to do. It was difficult, it was painful, the whole situation with Achan, he lost his life. probably his family members' lives. We're not sure about that. We don't know that he lost his eternal soul. He confessed. Scripture says, if you confess your sins, God is faithful. But at that time and place in history, in that military campaign, military discipline was essential. And he had to pay for his sin with his life. The feet hurts. And Israel had begun to strut on the runway a little bit, and then they tripped and fell right in front of all of the Canaanites. They were riding high and proud in the parade. The horse threw them off, and they had to get back on. Time to get back in the saddle. How do they do it? It's easy to overlook what happened and what God says, the importance of that. We're going to look at three things he says in the opening verses. First of all, Joshua 8, verses 1. See, I have given into your hand the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land. God says, I have given you. God dwells outside of time. The moment he says something, the moment he decides something, it's as good as if it's already happened. I have given. He doesn't say, I will give you. He says, I have given you. And we can have that same confidence when we fall, when we meet an obstacle, when we get discouraged. Romans 8:37 says that we are more than conquerors. Not that we will be more than conquerors. After it's all over, he says we are right now more than conquerors. That gets us back on our feet. We're the winners. Stand up. You're winning. Don't let this momentary fall discourage you. Ephesians 2:6 says that we are sitting together with Christ in the heavenly places. It doesn't say one day we might sit with Christ in the heavenly places. It says now we are sitting with Christ in the heavenly places. Think about that. That should motivate us to do and to be, and to not just wallow in self-pity. Could Joshua accept that promise that I have given you already? It's yours. Just go take it. I've given it to you. Statement of fact. Can we? I have given you life eternal. I have given you sanctification. I have given you holiness. I have given you Christ. Do we have the faith to say, I fell off the horse, I rolled in the street in front of everybody, I can get back on. He has already given me the finish line. That's what it takes. It takes faith. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. But if we don't believe that we've already won, will we have the courage to get back in the saddle when we face discouragement? And this isn't a call for false bravado. Some people have way too much confidence in themselves, but we can claim the promises of Christ if we respond in the right way. After you get back in the saddle, we're certain we're going to have some things right, some things wrong from that point. We won't be perfect. The horse may buck a little bit. We may have to grab the saddle horn and hold on and lose some dignity or something, but we will make it. That's the way it is. Secondly, they now know what to do. He says, end of verse 2, God says, I want you to lay an ambush for the city behind it. He now has a plan. They had a plan the first time. It was a human plan. He sent some spies, and they looked at the city, and they said, not much to it. 2,000 to 3,000 men will take care of that. And so Joshua sends 3,000 men to a frontal assault on the city. We show up at the city gates. Come on, guys. Let's have it, man to man, face to face. And they sent out some soldiers and just chased the Israelites right on down the road. Killed them. Bad plan. Humans' ability to assess and evaluate and to make plans, it always gets worse when a group is involved. Have you noticed that? we need a group to study this. Well, that can be very valuable, but something happens in a group dynamic. If one guy says, oh, there's nothing to AI, everybody else feels like they've got to say, yeah, that's right, or they look like they don't have any faith. So this kind of group dynamic builds, yeah, nothing to it, we don't think much, we can do it, yeah, and we get all this positive talk. It's a human plan based on human reason, and it didn't work in this case. The more you talk, the weaker the city looks, the less effort it seems like it'll take to win. That's all just part of foolish talk. How does that apply to us? Well, church growth experts, they offer all kind of plans. First, you need to poll the neighborhood. You need to use this program or that program. Maybe a semicircular auditorium is the key to a church growth. I remember when everybody had to build a semicircular church building, which has a lot of good things about it. Is that the key? Maybe we need a preacher in jeans and an untucked shirt. That'll do it. That'll bring people in. That will revive the church if we can just make these little changes. Boy, that's easy, isn't it? We don't have to change ourselves. We don't have to do anything. We can just change something out there, tweak something a little bit, and that's the key. That's human reasoning. Think there's nothing to church growth. We don't really need to put much effort into it. Just kind of change a few things, spend a little money, it'll all work. Well, we don't know how Joshua got the command to lay an ambush with a city behind it. We don't know if God spoke to him in a dream. We don't know if they used the Urim and the Thummim, these kind of things they used to get an answer from God. Maybe the commander of the Lord's army who appeared to Joshua outside the city of Jericho, maybe he appears again and says this. We don't really know. Now he's got a different plan. Lay an ambush with the city behind it. What if they had said, well, in the past, circling the city of Jericho worked. Let's circle Ai. What if they'd gone out and marched around Ai 7 times? What do you think would have happened? Well, the best case scenario is nothing would have happened. Worst case is something bad could have happened. The fact that something worked one time doesn't mean it's going to work the next time. We can't go back and say, well, what works over here is going to work over there. We can't, what works with a upwardly mobile population and an upscale neighborhood may not work in a family-centered congregation. That's a very different population, very different. So you can't say it worked over there, it'll work here. It worked in Jericho, it'll work in Ai. We can't count on copying somebody else's program. Success is found in what the Bible demands. Powerful, living witness of sincere believers, visibly different from the world. Mothers who are raising their children, singing songs to them. Jesus loves me. And the children's minds are filled with that. Families that are full of blessing and prayer and goodness, putting Christ first. Visibly different from the world. People who live the Sermon on the Mount. That's the key to church growth. It's not these external things. And we can't just follow what happened externally somewhere else. So that's the key. Follow the plan. And the plan is the biblical plan and not church growth plans for people who are paid to devise these great church growth programs. Some of those have some value, a limited value in a certain time and place, but they're not the key to growth. Rewards are different too. He says, you shall do to Ai and its king as you did to Jericho and its king, only its spoil and its cattle you shall take as booty for yourselves. You're going to do the same thing, destroy the population. But this time, you get to keep the stuff. At Jericho, they had to take all the treasure and take that to the church treasury. Then at Ai, they got to keep the stuff. Achan couldn't wait. He jumped the gun, paid a terrible price for that. But taking care of the priests and the tabernacle, that was expensive. Well, for us, as long as we have church buildings, we're building those, constructing them, maintaining them, upkeep, you got to do it. And a church building is a good thing. I mean, it's a visible place in the world's eyes for the church. It's a sign of stability. It's an address. It's legitimacy. A building can make the church part of the community. But the church one day may have to kind of scatter and go underground. We don't know. But as long as we have physical facilities, we need to keep them up. And that means we need to make a priority of not letting them run down, if we can possibly do that. If we do that, then the spoil, we can have confidence, will be ours. At this point, most of the commentators spend a whole bunch of time trying to figure out exactly what happened. If you read chapter 8, it can be a little bit confusing how many men, how many nights, what places, what exactly occurred. We're not going to get into any of those things. But here's a simple summary. Joshua followed God's command, Jehovah's command, the commander of the Lord's army's command, make an ambush. So he sent a sizable number of men to the north side of the city. And the area of Ai, and it's just been recently, within the last 10 years, pretty much identified. It was so obliterated. But it's a place with a lot of hills and steep ravines. If you've ever been to the Custer's battlefield, it's not a big place. Well, it's kind of big, but it's got a lot of deep ravines in which you can hide and hide a number of people. And that's what it was like there. So he sent several thousand men to hide on the north side in a ravine, while the main body is on the south side. They had to go there at night. Dark, you can't see very well, trying to be quiet so they can't be heard. Sound carries very well at night. And they spend all night in the dark, no fires, no talk, just huddled up in the dark, waiting. And then on the south side, Joshua is in charge of the troops there. But Joshua divides them. He says part of his group he sends to the west side to hide in another ravine. And then Joshua and the remaining men stay out front. When daylight comes, Joshua acts as if he's going to do the same thing that Israel did the first time. He's going to attempt another frontal assault. So Joshua takes his men up to the city to fight. The men of Ai said, we beat them once, we can beat them again. And they come out to fight them. And this time, Israel runs again. But they're not really running. It's a ruse. They appear to pull back, to fall back, pull them back, to get the men further and further away from the city. You've ever seen a mother bird when she's trying to protect her chicks? How she acts like she has a broken wing or something and kind of floats off and draws away. Well, that's what they do. And once they get a certain distance, then they begin to run and make it look like this is another route. They're all running. And the king of Ai says, now we've got them on the run. Now is our chance to wipe them out once and for all. Every man leave the city and rush out after them. They weren't very smart, but they thought it wasn't necessary. They ran out and left the city gates open. They said, we don't have time to open and close gates and all of that stuff. We've got them on the run. Now is our chance, so let's go. They left the gates open to the city. Every man rushed out to wipe out the Israelites once and for all. Well, whenever Joshua sees that, the men in the back come out and invade the city. And they set the city on fire, and that is the sign for Joshua's troops to turn. So when they see smoke rising from the city, because it's now unprotected, Joshua raises his spear. Here's the sign. Men turn around and go back to the city. Now we're going to fight them. They get them in a pincher movement. Men come out of the west ravine. So they crush and destroy all of the people of Ai. 12,000 killed. They not only killed all the soldiers, they killed all the women, all the children. And that's hard for us to understand, hard for us in our mind to justify. We don't know the whole situation there. The fate of the women and children might have been worse had they been captured than if they had been killed. Maybe that was in some ways an act of God's mercy. Maybe they were complicit in all the evil of that Canaanite religion and immorality and all of those things. We don't know. We simply have to trust God's judgment there. But they killed everyone in Ai and a sister city, Bethel, who's mentioned several times. They hanged the king of Ai. I think that means they probably killed him and hung up his body. When sunset came, they threw his body at the city gate, put a huge pile of stones over it. And the one who wrote and recorded the book of Joshua, if it were Joshua, or maybe Joshua had a scribe who wrote down the events, maybe one of the priests, we don't know. He said that pile of stones remains there to this day. Complete and total victory. But they followed the commands of the commander and not what they thought would be a good way to attack. We're not sure exactly how many days later, but verse 30 kind of provides a coda to the defeat of Ai. The next place referred to, the next place they go to, if it was a week later, a month later, we don't know, was to go to a strategic site. Joshua 8 simply says, starting in verse 30, "Then Joshua built on Mount Ebal an altar to the Lord, the God of Israel, as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded the Israelites." So next place we see them is Mount Ebal. They didn't just wander to that place. They didn't just find themselves at this mountain, Mount Ebal. Across from it is another mountain, Mount Gerizim. They had an appointment to go there. So let's talk about the place that they go next and what happens there after this victory. Why did they go there? One is just practical. The valley between Ebal and Gerizim, the companion mountain across the valley, it forms a natural amphitheater. Many people have tested it over the years, and you can hear somebody from the bottom of the valley up on the sides. You can indeed hear people speak. You can hear people speaking from one side to the other side. It's a natural amphitheater there. All Israel was to meet there. The Gentiles with them, those who came out of Egypt with them, they weren't Jews. Rahab and her family, they all assembled on those two mountains. In part because it was a good place to renew the covenant, as we're going to see. But there's another reason. Where they went, this valley and the two mountains, was an important part of Jewish history long before they ever showed up as a nation. Abraham, in Genesis 12:6, Abram pitched his tents in the environs of Shechem. Well, Shechem is a city that lies at kind of one end of that valley. So Abram, before he was ever Abraham, pitched his tents here. Jacob, Abram's son, bought a parcel of land outside of Shechem, outside the city. Joshua, of course, brought the remains of Joseph with him, and Joseph's remains were buried on that plot that Jacob bought hundreds of years earlier, at least 400 years earlier. Joseph's tomb is still there, if you like historical kinds of things. Everyone kind of recognizes that, Muslims as well as Christians as well as Jews. What else happened at Shechem? Well, Jacob dug a well in the area. And when you dug a well in the Holy Land, that was making claim to this place. This is my spot. I put a well down. I bought land here. Place of their claim. Shechem, that city at the end of the valley, is where Jacob's only daughter, Dinah, went to visit. And she went to visit in Shechem. The king's son saw her and said, "I like the way she looks. He ended up kidnapping and sexually assaulting her and then asking to marry her. And then two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, said, okay, we'll let our daughter, our sister marry you, but first you and all the men of your city have to be circumcised. And the king's son said, wow, I want to marry her. I'll be circumcised and I'll make everyone else be circumcised. So they did that. And then those two brothers attacked them when they were least able to defend themselves and killed them all. What a story. But this place where they go to renew the covenant is a place that has a long history of Jewish presence. It's a place where Jewish forefather bought land, dug a well. It's the earliest site of Jewish Canaanite conflict. I want you to go there, God says, to this natural amphitheater. And there I want you to renew the covenant. It's your land now, but what you experience in the land and whether or not you'll be allowed to remain in the land depends on keeping the covenant. They have the promise of God, and God's purposes will be accomplished. But they also have it conditionally. It's conditional for each individual. God's plan is going to work. But for every generation, for every individual, it is conditional. We mustn't forget that. We're going to see the conditions in just a minute. You know, we talk about the unconditional love of God, and God's love is unconditional, but it can be a tough love. His covenant with us has conditions. It's not like I have chosen you, run wild and do whatever you want to, and I love you unconditionally and there'll be no consequences. There will be consequences. It may be eternal consequences. It may be consequences in this life. But God's covenant has consequences. That's the nature of a covenant. You will get this, you must do that. I won't go into all the details here, but let's look at a few things. Now it shall be, well, in Deuteronomy 11 and Deuteronomy 27, Moses says, when you get to the Holy Land, when you get to the Promised Land, you go to Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. It's a divine appointment. And this is what Moses said before they ever got there. Now it shall be when the Lord your God has brought you into the land which you go to possess, that you shall put the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal. You know, the Apostle Paul tells us, remember the kindness and the severity of God. Blessings and curse. Good things and negative consequences. I want you to go there, assemble. He put 6 tribes on one mountain, other 6 tribes on the other mountain, and they repeated the blessings and the curses that would be theirs if they obeyed or disobeyed. He says, don't forget. He says, are they not on the other side of the Jordan toward the setting sun in the land of the Canaanites who dwell in the plain opposite Gilgal beside the terebinth trees of Moreh? He says, you know where to go. You go there, and that's where you shall repeat the covenant. What did they do when they get there? Now Joshua built an altar to the Lord God of Israel in Mount Ebal, as Moses the servant of the Lord has commanded the children of Israel, as it is written in the book of the law of Moses, an altar of whole stones over which no man has wielded an iron tool. So Joshua did just what Moses said back in Deuteronomy 27, Deuteronomy 11. Moses said it twice. It's important. He did it. Altar of whole stones. Offered on it burnt offerings to the Lord and sacrificed peace offerings. Well, first of all, if you love archaeology, a very recent archaeological discovery was a very small lead, piece of lead with inscribed on it one of the curses pronounced this day. Probably didn't come from this day, but this remained a very important sign for Israel. And at some point, someone wrote down one of those curses. and they found it in what appears to be the very site of this sacrifice, as we will see. They remembered it. I think the altar is interesting. Moses said, build an altar of whole stones over which no man has wielded an iron tool. Why so simple? Just a small, simple one. I think it's easy for us to get too busy building a fancy altar instead of focusing on the sacrifice placed on the altar. It's easy to invest ourselves in building a grand cathedral instead of investing in what happens within the cathedral. God's explicit instruction is don't overemphasize the altar itself, and instead focus on what happens there. Where is it? I've got a nice picture somewhere. I think it's about number 9. If you could pick up number 9. It's not... The bell's ringing. We got to quit. Oh, there it is. Okay. They found on this site a large, elaborate, I say large, larger and more elaborate altar built on top of a small, very modest altar. And the remains of that small, modest altar are there. It's made of uncut stone. The physical dimensions and the apparent size have been reproduced here. Exact replica of the 2-meter diameter, 6-foot diameter, circular altar dated to about 1406, which is the date of the conquest. This is what it looked like. You don't need a big, fancy place to offer the sacrifice. The place you sacrifice is modest. What happens there is important. 2 sacrifices. The burnt offering was to say, I want to renew the covenant. I'm it's a rededication. It's like coming forward to rededicate your life. The peace offering was saying, I'm sorry for past sin. One commentator compared it to a husband who's messed up in some way and brings flowers home, a peace offering. So that's what happened here. That's what was important. We'll pick up from here next week and finish with that, but I think it's time for us to end. Thank you.